Welcome back for episode 4 of the Gilmour Racing F3 car preparation. I'm Matt from KCK Lubricants, back in the workshop today to keep going along with what we do between rounds to keep this thing up the front of the pack and to keep it reliable. Some of the previous videos we've covered off the easy stuff. We've done engine oil, we've done gearbox ratios, and we've done some aero fixes under the car. Today, we'll keep it moving along, and I'll show you some of the other stuff we do to make sure that this is at peak performance every time it hits the track. Another thing we service every time the car goes out is the air filter. The air filter lives in this big air box here on the side, and it's just a standard style foam air filter, nothing particularly special, but like any air filter, has a really tough job to do. And if we race a weekend with a lot of sedans that do a lot of crashing and drag a lot of dirt onto the track, it'll actually show up in our engine oil sampling that the silicon levels will go up because of the dust that's got through this foam air filter. Now, we don't particularly clean this as often. We normally replace it, they are quite cheap. But one of the reasons we check it every time we hit the track is because of that. So that's that filter, but it's just been blown apart, and that's just a backfire or a misfire. Often it'll be as you're coming out of the pits and it almost stalls, it'll just sneeze back through the intake and blow the foam filter off. Now keep in mind these engines are restricted. They have to suck through that tiny little hole there, and the reason they do that is to slow them down. So this is a standard style. They taper the inlets to try to get as much airflow into this airbox or plenum as they possibly can, to try to make the engines be as efficient as possible and make as much power as they possibly can. So if anybody wants to see inside one of the airboxes, here it is. This is the actual airbox. You can still see all the foam inside it, but the injectors are in there. Fuel rails in there. It's just got a plug on the side, the two fuel rail fittings at the bottom, and the wiring harness. That's it. Everything's in that airbox. Obviously, somebody's put a lot of time and effort into designing that to make the engine work as well as it can. But that's it. Injectors are in there. Quite a neat little setup. Generally trouble-free. Not very often we'll have to pull the airbox off. I've only got it off this time to clean all that foam air filter out of it. That's another part of the thing we do. Every time the car goes out for a weekend, service the air filter. One of the first things we do when we get the car back from the racetrack is take the panels off and just a really thorough visual inspection. And the things you find are like broken body mounts. I don't know how many times I've welded those things up. They just sit in behind the bolts there and just a bracket to hold the side pod on. So not critical, but certainly something we want to be on top of. If this one breaks and remains broken, it'll break the next one, and then the side pod will come loose, or worse, fall off the car. Another thing we've noticed is it's had a bit of a hit up the front of the car. It's damaged those brand new barge boards we've put on, so we'll have to go through, pull that off, straighten it back up, and maybe even repair some of the carbon fibre work. And just other than that, check the wheel bearings, check the rose joints, really thorough. We don't want to be sending it back out to the track if it's got issues. Fix the issues in the workshop and concentrate on the racing while we're at the racetrack. So I'll go through, do the inspection, see what else we can find, and then move on from there. That's the damage there on the leading edge of the barge board that we noticed. And it's also cracked some of the winglet, and it's pushed it all back and damaged one of the mounts on the front. Now, stuff like this normally happens driving in and out of the pits, and it's not generally something that'll happen on the racetrack unless you have a big off. So that's certainly something we'll need to take care of, and we'll get on top of that now. One of the other jobs we've had on the list for a little while and haven't really got to is replacing these oil cooler lines. This is how the car came when it arrived with the fitting kit, but it's got this really short stainless steel braid hose. So the vibration isn't really absorbed by the hose, and it ends up breaking the fittings out of the oil cooler. Even the floor does move up and down with the arrows and as it goes over bumps, and that just puts more load on the fittings. I've probably put 4 or 5 oil coolers on this thing, and I'm really sick of changing them. I'm sick of cleaning up the oil. So we'll take the opportunity while we've got a bit of time. We'll replace these hoses. I've got some lighter weight more flexible hose from our friends at Speedflow, which I'm hoping the hose will absorb the vibration and not pass it on to the cooler. So I'll get these hoses off, we'll cap them up, and we'll see what we can make. Well, I think that worked out pretty well. The new pipes are on. As you can see, a lot longer. The fittings aren't pointing at each other, so the hoses can flex and move around. They're very light, so no weight on the tops of the fittings at all. I think that's particularly neat. And the best news of all, the side pod still fits. So one less thing off the list. We'll move forward. Next, we'll probably get into the suspension setup. We changed a lot of things on the car, track to track, and even if we race the same track twice, we'll still reset it up just in case something's moved, and just to double check it. That way we know it's spot on and we're good to go. So chassis setup, let's get into it. With this front cover removed, you can now see the front suspension of the car. This particular car is a dual shock setup. Some of the cars run a single shock. We've had better results with the dual shock, so we kind of stay with what we know. But you can see there, shock absorber each side. The blue things, potentiometers. So this is so we can analyse within the data the amount of suspension travel. Now we can use this to calculate downforce, we can use it to see how the car behaves over the bumps. We can even see how it is throughout the corner to make sure the weight transfer for the mechanical grips about where we need it. They go into a bell crank to convert linear motion into linear down to the hub. These push and pull rods out the front go to the sway bar. So the sway bar is similar to a blade setup, and it's mounted down to the front bulkhead. So depending on the action of each bell crank, they push and pull and then transfer the weight to the other bell crank, transferring it back out to the wheel. The push rods down to the front stubs are adjustable. It's very simple to adjust them. So when we've determined the length we need, we can check the ride height off these reference pads that Dallara have given us on the tub. We have a height that we know that we need to be. We can run anywhere between 22 to 40 millimeters ride height, depending on the track. So instead of trying to measure underneath the wood floor to the ground, we can just measure from there to the ground, and we know what it should be. We've got that predetermined height, so we know it's very quick and simple to do. Push and pull rods, we've also got adjustable shocks. So this is to set droop, heavily adjustable shock absorbers, bump, rebound adjustment, high speed, low speed. Everything we do is within these shocks. And generally, we'll set it up to where we think it should be for the racetrack, and all our fine tuning is done with the shocks. So we might touch on that in a separate video of how the shocks work, how it affects the car, and how to change the behaviour of the car should you need to do anything. Because these cars are so tight on space, that's where the radio mounts, in under the front cover there. And that's about it for under here. So we'll get these push rods set, and we'll get this down on the ground, and we'll get it on the scales. We've got the car fully dressed, and it's on the scales. There's a few things we needed to do to prepare to quarter weight this car. We're on a known piece of concrete, we use it all the time, and it's marked for each scale. The scales are on adjustable pads, so we can adjust the scales to be perfectly level and perfectly flat. We've got a known amount of fuel in the car. We've got a sandbag in the driver's seat to simulate the driver's weight. We know what the driver weighs, and we need to know we're on the correct race weight. All the tyres are the same pressure. Like I said, car's fully dressed, all the patterns are on. Another thing we need to do is disconnect the front and rear anti-roll bar. The job of the anti-roll bar is to transfer weight from side to side. So if we're trying to make adjustments on one side, we'll transfer it to the other side. If we've got the roll bars disconnected, then we're actually just adjusting the suspension as we intend to. The only adjustments I had to make today was on this front right-hand wheel. So it's just as simple as loosening off those jam nuts, turning that, and that can either lengthen or shorten that push rod. See there, that's the front anti-roll bar disconnected. When that goes back in, make sure there's no preload on it. Otherwise that will upset all your good work, everything you've just done. To give you an idea how close that is, that's perfect across the front and within half a kilo across the back. Now that we're finished on the flat patch, we've got the ride height sorted. Something we always check and often adjust is the wheel alignment. So just the toe in, toe out. Now this is also track dependent, and is probably the first thing to move. Should the car have an off or hit something on the track, if we know the toes move, we know that something's damaged and we can look a bit further. Now, we're not going fishing, but it's simply just a bit of fishing line with a lead sinker on each end to keep tension on the line. We've got specially made wheel alignment rods, both front and rear, to keep the fishing line or our new string line in the center line of the hubs. We've got steering stops that go on the steering rack to hold the steering wheel dead straight, so we know that when we're checking the alignment side for side, that the steering wheel is straight and the wheels should be pointing straight. And all we need to do with the standard steel rule is measure from the rim to the fishing line, and we can, by the difference of the measurement, we know if we've got toe in or toe out and how much we've got. So it's quite simple, it's a bit primitive, it's just fishing line and some sinkers, but it's a really quick and easy way to check the alignment, and it's super accurate. The string lines are parallel, we've got grooves in the bar so they go in the same place each time, and that's it. So I'll go ahead, I'll check the wheel alignment now. We've got a few changes to make for the next track that we're going to, so I'll just adjust those and I'll show you how that's done. There's a little bit more detail on the front crash box. It's just an old race one that's been damaged and we'd cut the front off it. Put the bar through the middle, it's got retainers on each side so the bar's dead center to the car. And it makes it, like I said, really quick and easy. 4 nuts gets the crash box on and off, and that's the front end sorted. To adjust the front, I've got to remove these, the adjustments in behind them, and the rear's a whole lot easier. We'll go down the back and I'll give you a rundown on that. Down here at the rear of the car now, we've got the front where we need it. We've just got some small changes to make at the back of the car for the next track we're going to. So the back's actually easier to adjust than the front. The adjusting nut is just in here, so all I have to do is loosen the jam nut to turn the bolt, and the rear of the tyre will move in and out as I adjust it. That's it for this episode. Car's finished, loading it in the truck as we speak. We're off to the racetrack. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed, you must subscribe. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next one.